Oh, that took a lot longer than I was hoping. A lot longer than I was hoping. So I finally fixed the audio issues, and it wasn't too hard, but I basically just started from scratch. Basically, uh, I added in I added in some filters that I haven't used before. Um, and I think I learned a little bit of a lesson on ordering your filters correctly, um, and also just in general, just some basic stuff on audio creation. So screw it, I'll do it for my own benefit. But this video was the one that I used. Make any mic sound expensive with OBS audio. This is already a pretty good mic, but sorry, there's people yelling outside. Um, so this was a pretty cool tutorial. I don't know if you can hear that or not. I don't think you can because of the new Nvidia stuff. But yeah, anyway, so this is a very good tutorial. I'm gonna actually try and study this as well because they did some really cool stuff on how to, for example, using the expander to ensure that if you have a small amount of audio, so like little whispers like this, that it picks it up, as well as loud audio like this. It also picks it up without going too far, using a limiter to make sure that it doesn't go over the limit, obviously. But yeah, this is a good tutorial. And yeah, you're not picking up that guitar in the back, not guitar, that bike in the background. Um, so with that, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, keep that. I don't think we're going to be able to do a whole lot today because I wasted a lot of time fixing the audio, but we'll see how much we can get done. Um, uh, okay. See that. And I'm just gonna listen to a few videos. I was originally gonna do some Plants vs Zombies game. Maybe we'll do that at the end, and then see if we can circle it back around. But I know that my dad is gonna get in contact with me in the next 20 minutes or so. So let's just get as much done as we can before my dad gets to me. Oh, and there. That goes there. You you did hear that. It should be working. What? Okay. Let's do this just in case. Right. That should be working. Here's my next door neighbor, obviously. Ah, all this setup. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I'm gonna start the video once that bike goes. Let's try and do the first drawing without audio. Bike's gone. Let's begin the video.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action, and all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe. And yet, we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice. Our police deserve our support as they tackle any and all violent disorder that flares up. Whatever the apparent cause or motivation, we make no distinction. Crime is crime, and this government will tackle it. Thank you.
So that is Keir Starmer on... That's Keir Starmer on the recent protests that's been happening throughout the UK, largely in the cities. Probably some of the most famous ones being, there was ones on Bristol, there was ones on, which Sunderland I think was one of the worst hit ones. Of course, some protests in Liverpool as well, where really everything has begun. These are protests that are essentially really built on kind of a lie, unfortunately. So what are these protests about? So these protests are based on, let me just quickly grab, so protests, yeah. Okay, trying to find the exact name. Stabbing. So there was a stabbing of 3 children in the UK, in Southport, that's what it is. So quickly read through some of the stuff. Get this going again. So since the stabbings in Southport, which left 3 children dead after the Taylor Swift themed yoga class, in a Taylor Swift themed yoga, I didn't even know it was a yoga class, tensions have been ratcheting up across the UK cities. Far-right activists have been accused of using social media platforms to spread disinformation, most notably false claiming that the Southport attacker was an immigrant who had arrived in the UK illegally. So, just to make things clear, there was a stabbing by a Axel Mugwana Rudak Ubana. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. They were born in Cardiff, right? Their father apparently was a very big devoted Christian who did immigrate here from Rwanda, but just take note, they're Christian. They're a Christian family. Now, whether Axel is a Christian themselves, I don't know, but certainly not Muslim, certainly not an immigrant. And yet, despite all of this, people have been protesting based on that. And it's funny because, as well, one of the sorry, it's not funny. It's not funny at all. But one of the children that sadly died, one of their family members was also like their, I think it was their mother was an immigrant. So it just kind of it's not really it's unfortunate what's happened, and it doesn't even seem like Axel had any kind of motive at all. It's interesting that they were apparently very introverted. I think they had a background in music or musical theatre specifically, and they also were featured in one of the Doctor Who episodes. No, in a Doctor Who Children in Need episode. So it's just funny how small of a world everything is. But yeah, they've lived here for years. They're born here, right? So whatever caused this person to do the stabbing, who knows? It seems like a common occurrence now that, especially a Taylor Swift concert, there will be some form of violence. It's really unfortunate. But as a result, there's been protests throughout the UK, all based on anti-immigration policy, literal burning down of immigration buildings. There's been attacks on like just private property. There's been attacks on private property. Just, I don't know if there's been reports of attacks on other people specifically, but of course they're going against the police as well, so there's lots of violence going on there as well. They attacked hotels used to house asylum seekers. Just read that now on the CNN article that I'm relating this all to. But yeah, and of course there's also protests on the opposing side as well, Antifa protests, to try and stop these people from being violent. Just seeing here as well, there was protests in Manchester, Belfast, Liverpool. The reason I bring up Bristol as well before was just because that's where I am currently. Apparently those riots even deployed on the North Irish capital, but Belfast, of course that would be Belfast. But yeah, lots of violence, and it's really unfortunate. Just gonna make sure I have my chat here. So, is this done? So overall, it's not looking good, and hopefully, the protests will die down in future. But it does seem like the likes of Nigel Farage are not necessarily fanning the flames, but they're like pointing out this is a result of our lack to stop the boats and stop immigration and all of that stuff. But we know that these protests are not founded on anything but bigotry, and that's what's really unfortunate. And I feel like as soon as you understand the context of why these protests have taken place, it's not just bad, it's like really unfortunate that we have reached this point where racism is the first thing that we jump to. A lot of people are comparing this to Nazism, when there was lots of protests and burning downs of buildings against Jewish people. because there was attacks on mosques and all of that. So I don't know how I feel about fully going all the way with that yet. I don't think this is quite Nazi level bad, and the only reason I'm saying that is really because right now there's no organization of this. This is just misinformation that spread through social media and has snowballed into this. And it's really unfortunate, but sorry, just need some water. As unfortunate as it is that it's snowballed into this, I don't think there's any clear organization as of yet. Now, I might be wrong about that. Let's take a look real quick. Who is organizing these protests? I do need to do some more drawing. I feel like I'm getting distracted. Is there anyone organizing the Southport protests? Tommy Robinson. Yeah, I remember hearing about this. So Tommy Robinson, I actually don't know a whole lot about him. He's a British anti-Islam campaigner and one of UK's most prominent far-right activists. Robinson has been active in the far-right policies for many years. He's a member of the British National Party, the British Fascist Party. Jesus Christ. Okay, I want to look into more of this. So what I'm going to do as of right now is I'm going to continue drawing, but we're going to hear some comments from James O'Brien, or Breen. No, it's Brian, I think. He's one of the main members of the LBC, which is what is it actually? Is it the Libertarian British something? I don't know. It's the home of live debate, but I don't know what LBC stands for. It's not important. Right now, just want to make sure that we've got everything ready. Checking my phone to make sure that I'm not overwhelmed. Need more screens. Okay, let's run this video.
Message of the day says, "Bring back Suella Braverman." I hope you've missed me as much as I have missed you, and I derive no pleasure whatsoever from returning during a period of such upset and turmoil. And once again, we find ourselves deriving absolutely no pleasure from having been among the tiny, perhaps, minority of people who feared that this sort of thing was on the horizon. I think of all the shows that we've dedicated to what the end game would be, or where the kind of rhetoric deployed by prominent public figures in the media and indeed in politics, where it would lead. And the reason why we know where it would lead on this programme is because we do, perhaps not as much as we used to, but we do talk to people who would be adjacent to the sort of characters that we saw this weekend trying to burn down hotels containing asylum seekers, setting fire to libraries, looting shops, attacking police officers, launching themselves at individuals who looked different from them with venomous fury. We have spoken to some of these people over the years, perhaps not the people who would actually pull on a balaclava helmet and go out to terrorise a community, in the case of Southport, already reeling from the grim murders of three little girls, one of whom, of course, was the daughter of immigrants. That's something I'm surprised to see has been somewhat overlooked in an awful lot of the coverage. You have the son of people born elsewhere embarking upon a murderous frenzy, and one of his victims is the daughter of people born elsewhere, but the problem apparently is people born elsewhere. Perhaps we can riddle that one a little bit later. I'm going to talk to you, I think, first about a few of the phone calls we've taken over the years, because I've been on a journey. Dreadful word, that. When I started in this job about 20 years ago, I wasn't particularly engaged in these matters. I was familiar with sort of the National Front. My dad had covered it for the Daily Telegraph in the 1970s and the 1980s. Nick Griffin was bubbling around. I think Farage was still a bit of a fringe figure. And I never really knew that this kind of thing was bubbling under the surface of our society all the time. I knew about the Notting Hill race riots, particularly after I moved to West London and got involved in Carnival. And by got involved in Carnival, I mean got on one on an annual basis. I didn't have any particular role to play or any volunteer type status. But I found out more about it. I have a little bit of history. I know as a Catholic that the Gordon riots in, I think, the 18th century were dedicated to the belief that Catholics were somehow responsible for all the country's ills. I know that Jewish people have been on the end of that particular accusation for centuries in almost all corners of the world. Latterly, in this country, Muslims have come in for the blame whenever anything awful happened. And indeed, they somehow got the blame when the Welsh-born Christian son of two people born in Rwanda committed terrible murders. The speed with which people were keen to blame Muslims, partly as a consequence of liars on social media, something else we've talked about a lot on this programme, was almost supersonic. And they never back down, really, these people. They can't. Their lives, their entire careers, of course, have been built upon inciting precisely the sort of violence that we saw this weekend. And it will be minutes, if they haven't done it already, before they start claiming that they warned against it. The people who said we need more robust responses, we need to be tougher on people, we need to get our country back. That's a particularly vicious phrase that I think we'll dig into a little bit later. They've incited these scenes, make no mistake, calling people, human beings, seeking asylum, having fled war zones and tragedy, calling them illegals, the most dehumanizing of terms, having lecterns, displaying the phrase "stop the boats," public figures calling for people crossing the channel in flimsy dinghies to be sort of left to drown, people in Parliament now who have subscribed to some of the grimmest rhetoric I can ever remember hearing. We know, everybody knows. I tell you what, something that possibly gets missed, they know. You can tell by the way they wriggle. I think Farage this morning is trying to blame it on the policing of Black Lives Matters protests, which of course happened during lockdown and did not contain anything like the attacks upon entirely innocent people that we've seen over the course of this weekend. They know, and they can't. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? People who've been feeding bile into the public bloodstream for decades about people born in other countries. It doesn't matter that they marry them, have children with them, speak foreign with them. It doesn't matter. It works. It's a business model. It's a career plan. It's a path to profit. And this is what happens. This is what happens. This is terrorism. These are pogroms. These are attacks upon wholly innocent people for the crime of having been born somewhere else, or having different coloured skin from you, or having different coloured skin from the people who are attacking them. So I'm going to run through a few things that have happened to me over the years. There's a moment many years ago. I don't know whether you remember it. I think it was before we started clipping things. John in Hounslow. And I've been looking at Hounslow today, bizarrely, because it's my home borough where plenty of asylum seekers are housed, including in leafy Chiswick, where I used to live. But Hounslow published a report at the end of last year describing the unacceptable conditions that asylum seekers face when they are put up in hotels. We may have a little look at that later. But I always remember John in Hounslow because it was the conversation that they always tell you that they're not allowed to have. He literally said to me on the programme, we're going back, 15 years maybe, I think? Was it in this building or the old building? I can't remember. He said, you can't say what you want in this country about immigration without being called a racist. I said, go on, mate, say it. I promise I won't call you a racist.
We do know what this story is.
And he said, OK, Hounslow's full of Pakistanis and they smell.
Fuck me.
Well, I think, actually, no, he said, Hounslows full of Pakistanis. I said, well, what's wrong with that? He goes, they smell. And I thought, oh, Lord. This was in the days before the programme was sort of sometimes making the news rather than simply reporting it. So I felt a little bit of a frisson of fear that possibly this invitation to him to say whatever he wanted to say about immigration was something I'd come to regret. And I said, what do they smell of, John? And he said, curry. I thought, what the hell do I say now?
I don't know what the
Long
fuck you say in that
pause, the
situation.
kind of pause that gives Keith the heebie-jeebies because he thinks the emergency tape might kick in. And it wasn't me being clever, it was me desperately thinking what question to ask him next. They smell of curry, do they? So I said, do you like curry, John? And he said, yes, James. A couple of years later, I took a call from a woman who was furious about immigration.
For
Very
fuck's
much
sake.
sort of UKIP affiliation. And she told me, and again, I still wasn't massively engaged in these kind of issues. She told me that immigrants got given free shops where she lived. Free shops, or £20,000 each to open shops. And I remember thinking, that can't be right. Maybe there's a sort of kernel of truth in it. Maybe there's a kind of scheme somewhere to help people from particularly difficult backgrounds set themselves up in. I could say maybe there's a grant, and I didn't have the facts at my fingertips. I didn't let it slide exactly, but I asked her for proof. I asked her for some sort of evidence, and of course there wasn't any. And then I looked into it afterwards, and it was complete nonsense. But she believed it. She believed it, that people born overseas were getting a better deal than she was. They were getting lots of free stuff. And then not long ago, I think it was possibly only last year, was it? We took a call from someone who at the beginning sounded quite sensible, said she shared a lot of my views. Sometimes my radar bleeps a bit and I think this is slightly not as it initially appears. And then she told me that her friends in the council had told her that all the immigrants got free cars, all the asylum seekers got free cars.
It's just insane. It's just insane.
And I thought, well,
I have heard about this stuff where like, oh yeah, they live in luxury hotels and it's like, yeah, they take the hotel and transform it into a low, like they transform it into this condition where like, you know, you're a room that would normally be for one person is probably now for 20 people. You're probably not getting the best food, if any. No, you probably are getting food but they're not going to give you high quality food. They're probably not going to give you much of a income to survive off of. These immigrants are. Actually, you know what? I'm saying all this. I haven't actually looked into it. So maybe I should, at some point, and see if I actually understand what kind of conditions these people are living in. I'm having a good bet that they don't live in anywhere near good enough conditions. That, you know, like it would probably be worse than living like on job seeker allowance and all of that stuff. You know, it would probably be worse than living off benefits. You probably get like, I wouldn't actually be surprised if the immigrants are treated so badly that the left might say they're not being treated well enough. It actually wouldn't surprise me if that would be the case. And I understand this idea of, well, we need to take care of our own first, because our own still has issues. But we're not just one people. We're a world of people, and especially in global politics today, we rely on each other for everything. Wouldn't we want the same if we were in trouble? And I wonder if those kind of people would say like, well, you know, I can take care of myself. You know, I'm a hard-working person. These immigrants just want the benefits and whatnot. And it's like, you have no fucking idea. You have no fucking idea how these people might live. It's insane to think that people would even think that these immigrants would be given 20 grand to open a business. That's insane. Why wouldn't they give that to, like, could you imagine if like an average person here could get 20 grand to open their business freely, that'd be crazy.
How do you prove that wrong? Especially if it's all over your Facebook feed. If you're reading this every day, if your feed is full of it, how do you prove it wrong? How do you know? How do you demonstrate to someone? They see a brown face driving a car, which of course was grounds for getting attacked in some towns in this country this weekend. A brown face behind the wheel of a car, that was sufficient grounds for physical attacks, vicious, violent physical attacks. But don't call them far right, whatever you do. Just concerned citizens trying to kick the living daylights out of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong. Attacking homes, attacking shops, attacking libraries, attacking hotels, attacking citizens' advice bureaus in some of the parts of the country where citizens need advice more than they do almost anywhere else. But don't
So
call
terrible.
them 5-star. Don't call them far right. So you can't prove that they haven't got free cars. You can give all the evidence you want, but people choose to believe it. And then there was a call that you may remember. It wasn't that long ago. A fella convinced, absolutely adamant, nowhere near London, lived at the other end of the country, but he knew for a fact that Sadiq Khan had introduced Sharia law in 2 London boroughs and was very keen to do it again. We did it live on air. We spoke to him live on air and showed him the error that he had made, showed him the source of the lie that he had believed. In fact, the original post described Shakir.
I think this is an issue in general where it's very easy to just believe something, right? In fact, I've had it plenty of times where I would see something, I'd see a headline, and I would just, it's bad, but I would be like, oh, okay, so that's what's happened, right? But you can't believe a headline. In fact, I'll give an example. I thought during the Olympics that those was it the drag queen people that were supposedly recreating the Last Supper. I thought that was real. I thought that was what they were doing. I thought that they were posing for the Last Supper. That's not what they were doing at all. It was just a drag thing. And I was so convinced of it. Because I saw it at the time. I saw it on the news and people were saying like, oh, I'm offended by this. I'm pissed off that this is taking over our country. I was like, okay, fair enough. And I was defending it and saying like, look, who cares? It's just some people doing drag of the Last Supper. Like, it really doesn't matter. And there was a bunch of Christians that were like upset and pissed off, and even Piers Morgan was talking about that, about how they pissed off a bunch of Christian people because of how because they tried to recreate the Last Supper on the Olympics, but it wasn't true. They weren't recreating the Last Supper at all. They were just doing some drag thing. But I was so convinced of it that I was defending it. I was so convinced of it that I was telling my friend about it, and then he was saying, that doesn't look like the Last Supper to me. And I was like, no, it's clearly representing the Last Supper. And then I decided to look into it, and I was like, oh, no, it wasn't. But it just, because it was talked about so much, because people can distort the reality so much of what people are doing and what is true and what is not, you start seeing the puzzle pieces go into place of bullshit, right? You start seeing like, oh, okay, that was recreating the Last Supper. And you start even seeing it. You start seeing that it is creating that scene of the Last Supper, but it wasn't recreating the Last Supper at all. It was bullshit. So like, why did I believe that? And now that I look at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's not. It's obviously not creating the Last Supper. And that's just one of many things. If you get into the rabbit hole enough of these things, then you start putting 2 and 2 together. Now, of course, it would have helped me if I looked into it a bit more before making my conclusion. But it happened like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, okay, fair enough. If people are saying that's recreating the Last Supper, fair enough. That was my mindset. But yeah, I don't know. It's really, really bad. It's really unfortunate that this is just the things that we do. I think people need more trust in the media and have facts of the information, because people are doing these protests thinking, oh, this is caused because of immigration and because of this stabbing. Well, what are you actually protesting about? The person that was the person that did the stabbing wasn't an immigrant or even Muslim. Um, but yeah, it just becomes a bit unfortunate and a bit uncomfortable when this becomes the case. Right, I'm gonna continue watching this video. I got my dad on standby. He hasn't messaged me yet.
Era law, which is, it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. And we showed him in real time, live on the radio, this is not true. So give me another reason for holding the views that you hold. And he hadn't got anything, but he didn't go away. He didn't go away having abandoned those views. So you build an opinion about Islam, immigration, refugees, asylum seekers. You build an opinion based on falsehoods and lies, exaggerations and embellishments.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are shown that what you believe is not true, you don't change your mind. You don't.
Yeah, that's the thing. So of course, when I found out that it wasn't true, I also like another one was the person that was supposedly transgender in that boxing match. They weren't transgender. There isn't a lot of information that's come out about it, so I'm gonna actually go on the side of not sure. But as far as I know, they weren't even transgender. They had I think it was intersex, which kind of brings out a whole other set of questions. Like, if they're intersex, are they like are people okay with that? Are people just going to say, "Yep, they're a woman, that's fine"? It just brings out a whole bunch of other questions that people aren't thinking about.
Change your mind at all. I don't know how you deal with that. I don't know how you deal with that. And then the hotels. I've seen some clips that have popped up on this radio station in the last couple of weeks about asylum seekers apparently being in 4-star and 5-star hotels. They're just not. They are just not. Farage started that as well, driving around with his Fisher-Price binoculars, filming himself going into buildings that used to be hotels and are now asylum centres, and claiming that they were receiving 4-star treatment. You imagine checking in to a 4-star hotel and finding out that the 5 people in the next room reheating their frozen meals in a microwave that was the level of service you were going to get. It's simply not true. Things that are not true. And yet people believe them. And that's why today we've got a problem. We've got a problem because you don't know how to tell the difference between the people who believe things that are not true and the people who just don't care. They can't wait for the opportunity to throw burning torches at hotels full of foreigners. They can't wait for the opportunity to help themselves to mobile phones and Croc shoes and trainers. They're just not there for any even vaguely racist or even political reasons. But they march alongside the people who are. And how do you tell the difference? How many of these people are susceptible to the truth? How many are susceptible to the facts? How many of these people, when they claim that living in a Holiday Inn Express is somehow the lap of luxury, how many of them, when they discover the reality of these scenarios, will go, actually, do you know what? Maybe that's not the thing I should be angriest about today. How much money, for example, was funneled into the pockets of Tory party donors during the PPE scandals? Yeah, I don't care about that. They can buy yachts, but if there's a fella over there getting some crumpets for free, then I'm bloody furious because he's brown. I don't know how many can be brought back to something that once represented normality in this country. My local.
What's annoying me the most is the fact that it's not even that people want the facts, right? That's the problem. People don't actually care about the facts. And when people don't care about the facts, what do you do? You know, what do you do when people don't actually give a fuck about what's true or not? We have scenes like this, for example, which doesn't include. So this is why I'm probably not gonna color this now. I do want to color it, I really do, but I can't keep working on this project. I need a new project. It's not that I want to finish it. There is lines on that one. There's not lines on this one. Okay.
Council, the London Borough of Hounslow, did a report at the end of last year into what life was like in these sorts of hotels, and the findings were pretty damning. They looked at the mental health impacts of the cramped living conditions, the poor food nutrition, the lack of privacy, the lack of health.
I'm going to stop the video here because I need to do my conversation with my dad. I'll be back soon, and I wouldn't mind doing some research on some other stuff, but I got to do this, and then I got to eat, so it's probably going to take a while, but we'll see. I'm happy that the audio is now finished, at least fixed. Sorry.